Hello and welcome to episode 25 of a mission a day. At any rate, I think it's going to be 25. Today we are going to Vall. The big day is finally here, and while we do that we can have a quick peek at the Juna probe, which is on the way. Now don't get confused, yesterday you saw the conclusion of that mission. Here we go, Juna cheap, it's just sort of exiting Kerbal sphere of influence. Yesterday you saw the conclusion. This is because the launch windows are very close together, so this Vall mission has to be launched before the Juna mission gets to Juna. So there's a little bit of time anomalies going on there. Let's just pretend it's a different team in the mission. Today our fame points, 100 credits per view on YouTube, gave us 9,700 credits, and no new subscriptions, so no extra 1,000. So thanks for just under 10 grand of extra money, and that will come in use momentarily. What we're going to do today is do a test launch, flight testing. So that means we can launch a ship for 5% of its actual cost, and we can use that obviously to see if our design worked. This I'm doing because the design I made to go to Vall today, I'm not completely sure that it will in fact work. So let's load that on up. I'll explain it. It's one of the most expensive rockets launched to date. The refueling and nuclear engine attachment missile was comparable. This one will cost, well, the flight testing will cost 2.5k, but the rocket itself is over 100 grand. What we have here is an asparagus styled booster, so these side tanks will drop off 2 by 2 and then the central stack will remain full. You see here I replaced some of the liquid fueled engines by a lot of smaller engines. I did this because they're a lot cheaper and lighter. They are a bit less efficient, but it's money that counts more than efficiency in the lower stages of the atmosphere. Those are going to drop away first. That's pretty straightforward. I'm expecting that to go without much trouble. And then we have this lander stage, which will also be most of the interplanetary stage. It's powered by a nuclear engine, so it should get a lot of gas mileage. But the nuclear engine, it blasts off its fairings to the side, and I'm not quite sure that they will clear the landing legs. Furthermore, I'm not quite sure if the landing legs will extend down far enough. So quite a lot of aspects to test, hence the test launch. So we're going to the launch pad and we will do just that. I'm going to launch straight up. This is something I'm going to do in the real launch as well, because this big lander on top of the rocket is probably not going to be great for aerodynamics. So as we load into the flight scene, we don't immediately fall to the ground. This is always a great start. So I'm going to throttle up and launch the missile. Wait, Kearney is in there? Well, this was supposed to be an unmanned test launch, but Kearney wants to be in there to see how it goes. That's fine, Kearney. Have fun. So we're going up. That at least works. Thrust to weight ratio not that great for the first stages, also because of these small engines. They have fewer thrust. They have less thrust than these larger engines, but again they're cheaper, they're lighter, and they will serve well for a first stage. What I'm going to attempt, well, I wanted to attempt landing on Kerbal with this lander, but it doesn't have the thrust for that. It can't support its own weight on Kerbal with the nuclear engine, so it will probably be a somewhat controlled crash with the landing legs extended, and then hopefully we can see if the legs hit the ground first or the legs do, or the engine does. Kearney, it's not going to be great to be in there, but we'll see how he gets on. He climbed in there without approval. Actually, this thrust to weight ratio is working out pretty well. We're at 200 meters per second at about 6 kilometers, which is pretty close to an optimal ascent trajectory. So far I'm happy. Coming up on first booster separation. Let's see how that goes. It should just fall straight down. But I'm going to replace those. Ooh, we're tilting over now. Probably, yeah, because of the drag of that lander. So that's not great. The separation, we cannot have the separation give us any spin. We'd really have to go up straight until we're out of the atmosphere. So we're going to use larger decouplers, and we're going to attach steering fins to the center stage instead of to the side stage, because now we are losing one axis of control. Also, we are going to switch out these engines for the steering ones, for the gimbaling ones, because we are going to need all the control authority we can get with this big lander on top. That will give us a lot of drag. So, not quite successful yet. But let's see if we can separate these stages, and we can have a look at the lander itself. So I'm going to cut the engines here. You know, if I'm going to separate them while we're spinning, they will for sure hit. So this might have to end up being destroyed. Go. Separate that. Yeah, that was expected. Now we are going to separate this, and now we are just on the nuclear stage, which, if my calculations were right, will not be able to slow down this landing far enough. We have the landing legs here, but we can just clearly see that they will not support a landing proper. So we might need to add another girder to that so that they can be a little bit lower. These landing legs look very crooked. I would not enjoy landing this craft like this. We will continue down to see if we can slow down enough so that Kearney at least may survive. It is quite possible that a contraption like this will cushion the blow enough so that the capsule here, the unintendedly manned capsule with our brave and stupid hero Kearney in it, will in fact survive. So we'll see about that. And if this does not work, I don't know how I'm going to get this marvelous lander in space. It will have more drag than the rest of the rocket. There is no getting around that. But hopefully with adding some control surfaces, I'll be able to. Kearney died! Big surprise there. Kearney died. He's going to be Kenny. Kearney Kerman was killed. Definitely confirmed that. I'm sure he will be back shortly. So that was our test launch. Cost 2,500 credits, possibly also 5,000 for Kearney. That should not have been in there. Let's see if we can modify this a bit. I'll see you after the modifications. So here we are back at the launch pad for a second test launch. Kearney is again back in the seat. I swapped him out, but then I did some more modifications, and now he's back again. I don't know what keeps this guy away, but he is coming along for the ride. Another test launch. You can see I spaced these stages out a little bit, moved the control surfaces to the center stack, lengthened the legs, and replaced the top aerodynamic nose cone with a keythane scanner. It's occupying the docking port, so as soon as something needs to dock with this lander, the keythane scanner has to go, but at that point I'm assuming we will have brought another one. So let's see if we can pull off another straight up launch. Straight up launches are basically the only thing I'm going to trust this rocket to do, because it's a horrible drag monster. Look at that, there is lots of nose cones, the scanner. I am not going to trust this to be any kind of steerable in the atmosphere. I'm just going to not touch the controls. If it gets up there, then it will be deemed a flight success, or at least flight capable, and then we will immediately move to an actual honest-to-God launch. Now, because this is a test flight, I'm assuming all the equipment will be dummies. I'm not going to recover the craft, I'm not going to do science missions, I'm not going to even scan the keys, and even though we didn't bring the sensor. Remember, we paid less than 3,000 for this launch, so getting any tangible benefits from it would feel like cheating. I hope this wobbling of the craft will not cause the stages to crash into the center one. If it does, we might have to add some separatrons, small SRP motors that can be used to safely detach, move away and detach the stage. So, as soon as we're coming up here, wobbling on the roll axis a little bit, hoping that's induced by all these tiny engines. As soon as they fall off, then hopefully that is going to go away. Coming up on separation just now, here it goes, and that one pretty good. It didn't hit any central boosters, so now it's just waiting until these tanks run out. They're still fueling the center core, and before they run out we should really make it to the upper atmosphere or even to space, so that we can pitch over and start putting this baby into orbit. Look, I put some struts here to reinforce these landing legs. I'll deploy those for your viewing pleasure. Look, and they should this time be just a hair lower than the nuclear engine. A very wide landing base, so I'm hoping this will be very easy to land on Vall, where the gravity will be very low, and that should make everything comparatively easy. Just to refresh your memory, the mission for this craft, even though it can seat one Kearney, it would be crazy to do so because this is going to fly to Vall unmanned, scan there for Kethane, and land in a spot that will later be colonized, probably. So this is going to be our first excursion to Vall, if we can make it happen. And, well, it will be a few years before anyone else is going to show up, probably, so if Kearney is going to hitch a ride on that one, I will pity him, because that is a rather stupid thing to do. Right, so we are definitely getting up here. We're at 40 kilometers now, and I think I'm going to attempt a pitch over maneuver. Because if this goes wrong, I just know that in the actual flight I'm going to have to wait until I'm actually in space. But this looks somewhat promising, even. This looks like a decent maneuver. And I know I've got about 4.5 kilometers per second of delta V in this transfer stage, which is also the lander. This should definitely be enough to get to Joule. Should it prove to be insufficient for landing, it will remain in orbit around Vall, waiting for a refueling operation. That will then be the massive space station, obviously. I'm going to jettison these stages now. There they go, separating cleanly. And now we are in space, boosting for orbit. I'm going to time warp this. This looks all well and good, as long as nothing crazy happens on this test flight. I will see you back at the launch pad for the actual launch. So thanks for enjoying the testing, and see you later. Bye. First of all, no, you're not mistaken. You're still watching the footage from the test launch. What I had intended to do is to scrub this, just cancel it, which in fact I did in a few minutes after this, and then launch the actual rocket, which then would be televised and commented by me. It was launched, it was commented, it just wasn't recorded. My recording software had crashed without invoking a error or whatever, and it basically just said after all the recording, oh sorry, nope, nothing got recorded. Had something to do with all the alt tapping I did, maybe all the stopping and the starting of the recording, or just unlucky witch voodoo. I don't know what, but any footage is lost. The point we are now is where the lander stage is in a trans-Julian trajectory. It's on the way to Joule. I did 2 or 3 more modifications to the rocket, added some solid boosters, and basically altered the ascent profile to be super safe. And that worked out pretty well. I even remembered to not put Kearney in the hot seat for the mission, as it's a quite important mission that we wanted to succeed. Additionally, what I did was I talked about what I wanted to do in this series, which is to go to Vall, obviously, with the space station / interplanetary excursion vehicle, but also to land a craft on Duna that will refuel using Kethane mining, and get a orbital refueling depot going around Minmus. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now I'm going to switch to the craft, which is currently on a Joule encounter approach. So see you in a bit. And as promised, here we are with the Vall Explorer. It's a bit twisted as I see it from the top down here, but that shouldn't be a problem, probably. We're on an escape trajectory out of Kerbal. No, we finished that bit. We are now on an intercept with Joule, as you can see here. Periapsis of 600,000 kilometers. Yes, 600,000 kilometers. So we're going to have to adjust that a bit. But what I was talking about before the switch is my plan to make a Minmus refueling depot. And I talked about this at length in the bit of video that was never recorded. What I want to do is scan for Kethane on Minmus, and I want to do this because getting fuel from a lower gravity well, as Minmus is efficient. It actually makes sense. Lifting fuel from Kerbal and then using that as a refueling depot, that does not make a lot of sense, because the fuel that's going to be lifted to orbit, that that fuel that will be lifted to orbit, that will require a similar amount of delta V, similar amount of fuel to be lifted to a refueling depot, as it will to lift it to lift it with the spacecraft that it would otherwise be transferred to from the refueling station. Jesus, that was not a very understandable way of putting that. What I tried to say is that if you lift the fuel from Kerbin, put it in a refueling station, and then refuel a small ship with that, it's about as efficient as just launching the ship fueled on a bigger launch vehicle. Sure, you get some gains in that you can use small launch vehicles, which are easier to build and have less complications. That is a bonus. This is what you see when I'm building the space station, the interplanetary exploration vehicle. I'm doing that in multiple parts, not because it's more efficient, but because that is actually the only way I know how to launch a structure that big. So in that way it makes sense. But if you could lift your liquid fuel and oxidizer from a shallow gravity well, from a small body like an asteroid or a small moon, that will be efficient, because then you're expending a lot less fuel getting the fuel into space, if that makes sense. The Kethane mod allows us to do this. If I can scan for Kethane on Minmus and get it, refine it into liquid fuel, and then lift that to either Minmus orbit or to Kerbin orbit. The delta V difference between Kerbin orbit and Minmus orbit is not that great, it's a few hundred at most. That would be efficient. Then I can just launch very small launchers from Kerbin, which are cheap, refuel them with fuel mined and refined on Minmus, which is efficient and should be virtually free apart from the starting infrastructure, and that way I can bootstrap more space exploration with fewer dollars, because the dollars are going to be a problem in the future again. If we look at the mission controller, we have, oh, the plugin is disabled, that's not good. Not that we are doing any missions on this run, but still it's better to have it enabled. We have 116,000 credits left. It's not a low amount, but it's not enough to colonize the solar system, so we will be needing some fuel. Now yesterday we scanned Duna for Kethane. We found a bit of it, so we know it's out there in the solar system, and this thing is going to be scanning Vall at any rate. I plotted an course correction maneuver at the ascending node point. We're coming up on that 6 days from now. 5, 4, 3, 2, just 1 day, reducing the time acceleration. 15 hours. Anyway, I'm going to do this correction and cut forward to the Julian sphere of influence. So I will see you there. So here we are, coming in almost, I'm going to call it dead equatorial in the Julian system, with a periapsis of 158 kilometers. Well, you're not going to get it any better than this, I dare say. This is a great entry into the Julian system, and we are now going to plot our maneuver node to circularize in it, taking a modest 500 meters per second, because this number is hugely low, because we are burning so low near Joule. That's great. And we are going to try and get an encounter with Vall. So we're going to make this orbit intersect Valls, and hopefully then at some point we will get an encounter. Actually, we're immediately getting an encounter. That's great. One pass by Joule and we will get that encounter. Coming in for landing. 800 meters per second of delta V. We can look in the flight engineer here, and if I drag that up into the screen, we can see we have 3000 meters per second of delta V left. So we have quite some delta V to circularize around Vall when we get there. About 2000. I'm thinking we could very well make it. So that is a relief. Our solar panels are deployed, and that means it's time to start doing some science. And I didn't... Oh. It just occurs to me I could have made these nose cones detachable. They're just dead weight now. And I didn't put them on decouplers, which is a shame. We carried a lot of dead weight. Anyway, live and learn. Oh, we're still in high time acceleration. Look at that. That's why I can't do anything. We're so far out though, it was unnoticeable. Right, so it's time to do some science. I do have communitrons on there. Great. I'm not that much of an idiot. So we're going to observe the materials bay. What do we got here? The computer gave an odd report no matter how many times we sent the request. Open sample bay doors. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't let you do that, was the only reply. The doors did open very promptly when we opened the fuse box panel. Very curious. That's a nice reference to A Space Odyssey there. We're going to transmit this home twice, as we are wont to do with these science experiments. As you might know, it's very possible to spam it to get a almost 100% return. I think that's not quite fair. If something like fairness exists in a single player game, I'm going to transmit all these readings twice. So we get some increased return over a single transmission, but not a huge amount. Bringing it back would still be a lot more interesting. So I'm going to observe the materials bay again, transmit that back again, and where is our goo canister here? That one for a second time. And then we are going to have a look at our gravioli sensor, wherever I stuck that on the sensor. Seismic accelerometer doesn't do anything here. Is this the gravioli one? This is the gravioli one. Gravity data. This was transmitted by the suicide probe once or twice, so no new data there. Obviously going to time warp into this burn, and I will cut that out for you, so see you there. Wow, we're coming up on the burn node here, but look at that, we get a purple sunrise from the sun over Joule. That's quite a good sight. I have not seen that before in this game. So pretty good. Our burn, because we're doing it with the efficient but low thrust nuclear engine, will take about 7 minutes. And we are going to straddle the node, so I'm going to start when the node is at T-minus 3.5 minutes. And I will fast forward the burn while I do some science for you, because 7-minute burns are boring. Here we go with some music, with some science and some rocket fuel. See you on the other side. Holy moly, the burn is complete almost, but far before we even got to the node. Fortunately, I was afraid the periapsis would have dipped too low. I don't know why the burn indicator miscalculated the burn duration for that, but that could have been disastrous. Fortunately it wasn't. We're still at 155 meters of periapsis, which I think is still outside Joule's atmosphere. And I hope so, because the last time we encountered that atmosphere, results were less than spectacular. You may have seen me in the fast forward retract 2 of these solar panels. In the case we would graze the atmosphere, I don't want all of our power generating capability to be shot. And again we have a marvelous picture here. The sun behind one of Joule's moons, and of course Joule itself. Rather good if you do ask me. I'm taking screenshots of that, and then I will fast forward. No, this burn is so short. I'm going to fast forward until we are in Vall's sphere of influence. See you there. Something terrible has happened. And I also have the answer that the question that plagued me many missions ago was why it took so much delta V to get in orbit around Vall. The answer is it doesn't take that much delta V. It really doesn't. The only thing that happens is that you do have to go sort of in the same direction around Joule if you want it to cost not that much delta V. I'm going the opposite direction. That does not help matters. All hope is not lost, perhaps. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fly by Vall, say hello, then return to the periapsis very low near Joule, boost out that orbit around Joule as high as it will go, and then try and switch the orbit around, and then meet up with Vall again. I'm not sure if I'm going to have enough fuel for that, but that is what we are going to have to attempt. Meanwhile though, we can, and we will, do science. Do the materials bay near Vall. That one is still new. It would be a pity if we brought this lander all the way, and it wouldn't get to land. Anyway, this is looking to be quite a lengthy mission because of this. I will fast forward you all these trajectory alterations. You know the plan, and you will see in the end whether it was successful or not. So sit back, enjoy the ride, and laugh at my failure to take these things into account. The mission that was planned for days and days and days is now in peril, in jeopardy, because we're going the wrong way around. Let that sink in for a bit. Very nice. Very, very nice indeed. We are going to activate the keytane scanner. I'm going to stop talking, and you can enjoy the fast forward. See you in a long time. Right, this looks familiar probably, we've done this 3-4 times now, but what we just did was quite an ingenious piece of maneuvering, if I do say so myself. It took a month in game time. We boosted our altitude high above Joule and flipped orbits. This is incredibly wasteful of delta V, of course. When you're approaching Joule, you can fine-tune the direction of your orbit with just a few tens of meters per second instead of hundreds or even thousands. If you've been counting, we have expended after this burn about 1300 meters per second of delta V to switch the orbit direction. This is, if you were wondering, a lot less than if you were to turn around here at periapsis and then slow down. Our periapse speed here was about 10 kilometers per second. It was at 150 kilometers instead of 500. So that would have meant a delta V requirement of 20 kilometers per second, about 20 times more than we actually use now. Sure, it took a month, but we do have some fuel left, and we would not have otherwise. So, going to... Ooh, we have to go the other way. This is just stupid. We're wasting tens of delta V's now, missing the closest approach around Vall. I think a landing will be out of the question, but hopefully an orbit is possible, so we can scan the planet for keythane, and at least when the station gets here, then we will have a lander ready. It will just need refueling and then it can land. There won't be a test landing, then it will immediately be manned, but hey, that's the way Kerbal kind does these things, so that is no problem at all. So let's see if we can't get this periapsis as low as possible. 300 kilometers is decent, and we'll have a nicely inclined orbit that will allow us to scan a good chunk of the planet for keythane, which is exactly what we want, of course. Let me try this again, time warping to the... Ooh. I do want to focus on either Vall or the vessel, so I'm going to do... here we are, focused on the vessel. Great. And this time we are orbiting in the same direction as our target, which always helps tremendously when trying to meet up with it. You can see I am a very pro astronomer with these tidbits of useful knowledge. It's pretty great, isn't it? That's a rhetorical question, don't answer that. So here we are crossing in front of Vall, but not quite crashing on it yet. And crossing into its sphere of influence now. Now we have... Oh, that's going to be a beautiful polar orbit, useful for scanning the surface of keythane. So we are going to reduce this, and this tells us we need 900 meters per second. We have 800! No! What will our orbit be like if we only expend 800? Let's have a look. We only have 800 meters per second. No, 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 no. We need more. It will be an open orbit if we... Well, that won't be an orbit at all. It will be... No. We have 798. That's not enough. No, don't tell me we're not going to be able to establish orbit. What if we drop our periapses now for 100? And then if we break here, how much would that be? Oh, that would be more. 800, and that would still be 900. No, no, damn it. If we do the full maneuver here, what would happen then? It would probably be less efficient. Ooh. No, that would... We couldn't go in. We couldn't come in for a landing. Let's see. Vall is now robbing us of orbital speed. No, it's actually giving us a boost. Shit, I'm trying to figure out how to get into an orbit around it with just the delta V we have. 700 and... Oh, this hurts. We need just a hair more than we have. We have this much. We have this much to play with. If we don't do anything, what happens then? We will remain... No, we will get in an orbit that won't even get us near Vall again, because we'll be out of its plane. Shit. What if we modify our plane here? We will still be crossing around Vall. We'll still be crossing that orbit, and maybe we will get a lower periapsis. We can get a low periapsis going, and then get into orbit for just 500 meters per second. Yeah, we're going to try this burn, and then hoping that on the next pass we will be able to get into orbit for a lower amount of delta V. I'm not hopeful though, I'm not hopeful. Please enjoy some more fast forwarding, because this will again take a while. No! We have now been captured by Lathe, or we'll get an encounter with Lathe that will fling us far out of our possible encounter with Joule. So I'm just going to go for broke. Well, I'm not going to go for broke, that's not the right term. I'm going to accept that Lathe encounter for more science, and then try my darndest to get into an orbit around that, or at least some orbit where we can be reasonably safe that this craft will remain in the Julian system, because all is not lost. When the interplanetary expedition vehicle gets here, then we will be able to get this easily, and it's much easier than getting a whole new lander from Kerbal. So let's see what is needed to get into an orbit around Lathe. Much more than we have. Much more than we have. So, is this encounter going to slow us down or not? No, it is. Oh, this is a terrible orbit. This is a terrible orbit. What do we need to get into a low orbit around Joule? This is something we cannot do. We might need to go for a crazy inclination, so that we almost never... Actually, the trajectory after this Lathe encounter is pretty good. I'm going to boost up the periapsis a bit, so that we can pass between these moons and be reasonably sure that none of these moons are going to grab our Great Explorer. What I'm worried about here is that when we leave this behind for years and years, it's going to crash into one of the moons eventually. This is not something that we want. So I'm trying to park it now in an orbit that will not have this happen. Landing would of course have been a lot better, but we wasted 1200 meters per second of delta V on, wow, a lot of data here. We wasted a lot of delta V flipping the orbit around Joule, so that was a big blunder on my part. I'm just going to go ahead and get the most of this science out of the craft, we should have a plethora of science points back home. At least that's some consolation prize of this mission. Now you can enjoy the last fast forward while I do this parking orbit insertion attempt. Yes, let's call it that, why not? And we can look at Lathe, another pretty moon of jewels. Just like Tylo, where the other satellite ended up, not at all the intended target of the mission, but hey, we got here nonetheless. It happened. These things happen in a pro space program like mine. So here we go, and we are going to put a maneuver node on the apoapsis and increase our orbit so that I feel it is unlikely that we are going to encounter it. We are still crossing orbits with Lathe, but hopefully we can get out of there. We are crossing orbits with Lathe here at 2 points, but only for a brief amount of time. So I'm gonna go ahead with this burn. I'm not sure if it's the smart thing to do. I'm gonna hope it is. I'm going to exhaust the last fuel. No. That's never a good idea. I'm just going to leave it here and hope that the interactions with the moons will not cause it to crash anywhere. If that happens, then it will be lost, because there will be a lot of time warping going on when this is in the air. But that's just a risk I'm willing to take. Any maneuver is not going to eliminate that risk, so the fuel that is still left in the tanks here might as well remain for when it is picked up, if it ever will be picked up. So, not quite a mission success, going back to the space center here. Although we did visit the Julian system, we did scan Vall with a lot of science, we did scan Lathe with some science, we scanned Joule with a lot of science. So, one thing, there should be a shitload of science points here, over 1,000. Pretty great, if you ask me. What I've been wanting for ages are not the remote guidance units, are the bigger solar panels. Where are they hiding out? Here they are. These I want, the large electrics, 300 science, bam, researched. And now we get to choose other wheels. And I'm just recalling my mission for the Juno rover is asking me for a specific set of batteries. So it's asking me for the Z1K rechargeable battery bank, I think. I'm just going to have a quick look at that mission. Test drive the Z1K rechargeable battery bank. This is a Z4K rechargeable battery bank. Oh, I already have that. When did I Oh! I didn't mean to research that. That happened through a click through the mission controller then. No, great. And here we get... No, this is the Ketho electric reactor unit. Kethane consumption, power generation, xenon gas byproduct. This is power in xenon. That's great, but where are we going to get this rechargeable battery bank from? Possibly here. I would have researched this otherwise. Thermoelectric generators are always good. You get energy always. And these batteries are huge. I'm just going to go ahead and ask JCheetah if this is the Z1K or if there's a Z1K. I'm just going to find that somewhere. For now though, we spent the 500 science on this without looking at anything else because I clicked through the mission controller. Anyway, this is all bullshit. Never wanted this anyway. So, happy with that purchase. Today was a pretty long mission due to some mishaps and some fumbling to try and fix that. We did get a lot of science. And tomorrow we shall attempt a rover mission if I can sort this battery nonsense. For now, this was Lorenzo. Thanks for watching. As you know, your views give me credits, your subscriptions give me more. So do that. Share, subscribe, comment and like. If you did, of course. Otherwise, just don't. Have a good evening, or whenever you happen to be watching this. Goodbye.